Let's get into our first topic of conversation here, and that is with 8 games to go, really half a season.
Unless you want to cut it here, just so we can know where to post the podcast.
Fact check. What would be a success for the Broncos here during these last 2.5 months of the season?
Schedule. Phil, I think you've got to go on a winning streak here to prove it's not just about. There's things like, can the defense keep playing to this standard without some guys? Can the offense find some success that shows it's likely to get better next year? But I think ultimately it does have to go. It has to do directly with wins. Can you go on a run at some point that shows, hey, this team is capable in 2023 of putting itself in playoff position? Because it hasn't seemed like it the last few years, because this team has not had an ability, and I'm not talking about this year in particular, but this team has not had an ability in a long time to go and win 5 games in a row, or, win 7 of 8, win 3, lose 1, come back and rattle off a bunch more. It has not shown that ability, and to compete for a division title, which I think is clearly the goal for this staff, to compete for a Super Bowl, home field advantage in the playoffs, all those things, you've got to find a way probably to get 12, 13 wins. And so to do that, you've got to find a way to win 3 or 4 games in a row, and then maybe you drop one, you come back and you do the exact same thing, win in bunches. And so I want to see over this final 8-game stretch, hey, can they go on a 3-game run? Can they go on a 4-game run? Can they beat several quality opponents in a row? Because if you beat Baltimore, but then you lose to Kansas City, and then you beat like the Rams, and then you lose to Kansas City, that to me is not it's not a great sign for the future that you're going to be able to consistently compete with these top teams. Because we talk about, hey, can you beat the Broncos right now are struggling to beat any team, obviously, but to get to where they want to go, they need to consistently be good enough against really good teams. And so I want to see them stack wins to show that moving forward, you can be a playoff team, even if it doesn't happen this year.
I think the natural sign of like, okay, was this a good season or not? Playoffs. We said we're going to hit pause on that. I think a step down from that would be, did you have a winning record? And I think that for the Broncos to get to 9-8 at this point, obviously that means 6 wins. I'm not even sure if that's really something that you could realistically talk about at this point, just based off how the first 9 games went. So removing those 2 sort of goals from this conversation, I would say a win against Kansas City would go a long way in terms of just being like, okay, got that monkey off our back. Even if it's just sort of an anomaly, a win against a team like the Chiefs, I would be like, that was really good. Some beating the teams that you're supposed to beat, take care of those. That starts with the Raiders, the Panthers, maybe a Cardinals team, maybe the Rams. Depending on where things continue to go for the defending Super Bowl champs, but. Take care of business against those teams, then I would be like, okay, they beat who they were supposed to be, and they got 1 against the Chiefs. I would take that at this point. I'd say that was a good end to the season there. Really rough beginning, but the end kind of finished up strong. But I'm not even sure, like you mentioned, like if you could just talk about stuff like a winning record, things like that. Let's just start with trying to beat teams you're supposed to beat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even if you say you beat the teams you're supposed to be, which is the Raiders, Panthers, maybe the Cardinals at home, and then you mentioned getting
maybe the Rams.
Well, yeah. So that's 4 wins there. I mean, and maybe you get a win over one of these other teams, whether it's the Chargers or, beat the Chiefs one of these 2 times. That still puts you at a record over your final 8 games that's 5-3 or 4-4. And I think if you're, the organization, you've got to decide, is that good enough moving forward? Because if you're sitting here and you're going, man, we finished 5-3, that's amazing. Like for some teams right now, like the Buffalo Bills are sitting there and thinking, we have 3 losses. This is a disaster.
Yeah.
And so I do think there has to be a high standard set of, hey, we should, our goal should be to go 6-2 here and see, can we make things happen? And obviously, who knows if that's realistic at this point. But
especially with the roster in the state that it's in, with all of the injuries.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, 4-4 is not good, or 5-3 is not good when you're talking about expanding that to an entire season. But considering where the Broncos are right now, 5-3 would be a significant turnaround.
Oh, it definitely would be a significant turnaround. But there's a way to go 5-3 and still not really have a signature win.
Yeah,
because you could beat the Raiders, Panthers, Cardinals, Rams, and Chargers.
That would not be enough for me.
Because then you don't have that win over the Chiefs. You don't have a road win against the Ravens. You don't have like I would not really consider right now a win over the Rams to be like a high caliber road win. So I think there needs to be, if you go 4-4 or 3-5 or something like that, there needs to be a win where you're like, okay, when we're at our best, we can beat the Kansas City Chiefs, or we can beat the Ravens on the road, or we can, beat the Chiefs at. I mean, gosh, if you beat the Chiefs in Arrowhead, obviously that would be
amazing.
That'd be a great win. I think there does need to be some sort of one, string some wins together, and two, you're right, have a signature win that makes it so when you come back in 2023 and you're healthy and you've got another year under your belt with Russell Wilson, that you believe, hey, we're not just here to go 10-7 and hope to sneak into the playoffs. We're here to try to compete for a division title.
The interesting thing about this Broncos team is they've been in every game except that Raiders loss. And so I'm wondering.
They were in that one, too. It just wasn't a one score.
Yeah, at the end. At the end, it wasn't really close.
Right, but they cut it to 2, and then the Raiders went on a long drive in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I think.
I mean, they
right.
certainly had a chance with
point,
7 minutes to go or something like that.
Yeah, but they didn't have the ball at the end like they have in some of these games, going to try and either tie it or win it.
Yep.
I'm wondering if that continues once they go on the road and face a team like the Ravens. Or if they go on the road, they face a team like the Chiefs. Will this similar trend of style of Broncos football, will that continue? Or has that just been a factor of playing teams that at the beginning of the year you thought these should be wins? Obviously, that hasn't played out that way, but I'm sort of wondering, okay, this defense, the number one scoring defense in the NFL, will that continue when it's Lamar Jackson on the other side?
Yeah, I mean, I don't expect these guys to be perfect the whole year. There's going to be games that are difficult. The Ravens and Chiefs are really good for a reason. I think the standard has to be adjusted. If you can hold the Ravens to 24 points, you probably feel just as good as holding some of these other teams below 20.
Yeah, because one thing I was thinking about was maybe from a defensive perspective, it's easy to get caught up in this. We're really good. The offense is not really good and get frustrated by that. But I'm wondering if maybe in some of these guys' minds at this point, it's like, okay, let's just keep playing hard on defense to just try and show the league we're the best defense. And so maybe that would be a goal for the rest of the year is, hey, we didn't have the team success, but at least us on the defensive side, we finished the year as the best defense. Like maybe that's something that is continuing to motivate them, even though overall the team success hasn't been there.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, with each week it feels like people are like, well, if you can do it against this team, you're a good defense. Like people are like, if you can shut down Derrick Henry, that means you're a good defense, and they did that. They held Derrick Henry to 50-something yards.
53, I believe.
Outside of a botched flea flicker, a botched coverage on that flea flicker, you hold them probably to 10, 13 points. I mean, they played really well in that game. And so at this point, I've seen enough that I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt that, hey, maybe you don't go in and hold Lamar Jackson to 10 points, but you're probably going to – I don't expect his defense to just fall apart all of a sudden. And
unless there's injuries.
Right.
Yeah.
But, there's been injuries, and they've still stepped up to the plate. You hope to get Randy Gregory back at some point. But you're right. I think a goal for them continue to play at this level. And I don't expect they're going to slip significantly. There's guys on that defense that want to put good tape out there, earn a contract, or, continue to, whether it's Pat Surtain fighting for kind of an all-pro spot or, a number of other guys. There's no reason why their performance should slip. And you do have those 3 matchups against the Ravens and 2 against the Chiefs. But the rest of the schedule, you should be able to play great defense against the Rams, the Chargers, Cardinals. I mean, there's plenty of games here where the defense can can make something happen.
Yeah.
To get those wins that we talked about, Phil, the offense definitely has to play better. And I do think that some people gave Russell Wilson a hard time for saying we just need 2 more touchdowns. But
some people are giving him a hard time, but not you.
Not me, you.
No, other people are saying that was. Uh-huh.
If you could get 2 more touchdowns a game, presumably he's talking about 3 total touchdowns and maybe a field goal here. If you can get to 21, 24 points, you are probably going to put yourself in position to go 5-3, 4-4. I mean, I do think the defense is good enough that against those opponents, if you could get to 21, 24 in that range, you're going to have a really good shot to win a lot of these football games.
It's not that Russ just said we need 2 more touchdowns. He also said, I know how to do that.
Yeah.
Makes you think a little bit.
What does it make you think about?
Well, it makes me think if you know how to do it, let's go ahead and do it. Am I right?
I think this last game was it's just hard to. This last game was difficult in that you'd like to build on that momentum from the Jaguars game. And then I do think it's difficult to go in and by the second snap, you've lost 2 of your top 3 pass catchers that you game planned for when you started the week.
Yeah, most definitely.
And then Russ gets sacked 1 time in the first half, and then 2 offensive linemen go out, and you're got a guy at center who has never played a snap in the NFL and is now being asked to hold up against blitzes. I mean, it just...
a lot of times the mentality from a coaching staff or like from the team is like, hey, it's next man up. I think that's the approach you have to have. But in reality, the starter is a starter for a reason, and the backup is a backup for a reason. So it doesn't really make sense that this person's just going to come in and play at a really high level. Even though they'll say, hey, next man up, we got to do this, we got to do that. The drop-off is significant because one is a starter and one is not.
Well, it's more, to me at least, it's less about a talent perspective and more just you've built a plan around what Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler do well. And then when that gets taken away, it's not just that, who came in? Jalen Virgil, Kendall Hinton. It's not just that those guys are not quite as good as Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler. It's that they don't do the same things. And so all of a sudden you've got to try to figure out in the moment, how do we correct that? Clearly that has not gone well for the Broncos. What was it, the Texans game? Jerry Jeudy also went out very early in the game, first, second drive, and the Broncos struggled to find some rhythm there until late in the game. I mean, I just think that combined with the Titans defense that was missing a lot of starters but still has that aggressive mentality, that made things difficult. And so I wonder if it's impossible to separate it from the rest of the season, but I wonder if that one had less to do with this offense just can't do anything, and it's more about the unique circumstances of that game with the injuries.
Yeah. But certainly, there's a drop-off from Graham Glasgow to Luke Wattenberg.
Of course.
Just the talent level. But also, Luke is not there yet.
They also said Luke didn't have really any reps.
Yeah.
So it's hard to expect him to come in, and it wasn't just about him being physically overpowered. There were times when guys were going free because he wasn't on the same page
with Dalton
Reisner or Quinn Miners. The snaps weren't, I think Nathaniel Hackett said everybody snaps the ball a little bit differently.
Yep.
That was an issue. I think some of those things, it sounds like Graham Glasgow will play this week based on what Nathaniel Hackett has said, but
they've dodged a bullet.
They dodged a bullet.
It sounds like they dodged a lot of bullets. Like a lot of bullets were flying, and they just sort of went like the Matrix a little bit. The Broncos went Matrix. That's the headline for this.
Yeah, for this podcast.
So, yeah. So those are some team things that I think that we can identify. And then I think there's also some individual things, like, hey, can Greg Dulcich do enough down the stretch here where you're like, this guy is going to be a premier tight end in the league? That would be nice.
You're like, of all the players on this team that could do individual things.
That's one thing I want to see.
Greg Dulcich came to your mind first.
That was number one in terms of what I'd like to see from this offense moving forward. If Greg Dulcich can become a top 5 tight end in the NFL, that's what I'm looking for. Because the rest of the guys on the offensive side of the ball, I know what they are. So, what can I see on the offensive side of the ball the rest of this from an individual perspective? Yeah, he's the guy I'm looking for. Because sometimes they throw the ball to him a lot, and he's a huge part of the game plan, like in Jacksonville. Or other times, like last week, he just got the one catch for 11 yards. So what is he going to become? Because the other guys, I know what Cortland is. I know what Jerry is. I know what KJ is. At this point, I know what all these guys can do. There's not like a young running back that I'm looking forward to seeing.
You know a lot.
Dulcich is the guy that I'm paying attention to on the offense.
Yeah. Well, when you started this conversation, you just said the team. You didn't say offense.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I said on the offensive side, I'm looking at Greg Dulcich.
Well, you said
Sorry.
From a team perspective, the one guy I'm looking at is Greg Dulcich.
No. I mentioned all the team stuff like, hey, can they string a few wins together? Can they do this? And then I said, from an individual perspective, I just started with him.
Yeah.
I can continue on.
No, I'll say the main guy I'm
On
looking
offense?
at. No, on the team side, because that's what you said, is Pat Surtain.
Yes, obviously. If he can become...
So obvious you didn't even think to say it.
I wasn't ranking him. Jesus. I wasn't like, number one, Greg Dulcich.
Yeah.
I just mentioned his name first.
When I bring up points, I like to say like the fourth or fifth most important one first. It's like a backwards
We're not
ranking.
going to be able to post this podcast.
Goodness gracious.
Not,
Next week it's going to be like, and I'm joined by my everything, Ben Swanson.
Yeah. You're like, okay, well, he's not nearly as good as Greg Dulcich, but I'm watching Pat Surtain.
No. Of course, I want to see. Sorry, I was thinking from an offensive side. Then we could talk about the defensive side. But let's go ahead and talk with the.
It's hard to understand what you're saying if you don't say it out loud.
That's where I was thinking.
Yeah.
But also, I wasn't ranking them. So not everything's a competition.
Both. That's good because you would not be winning.
Okay, keep going.
Yeah, I want to see if Pat Surtain can continue this against some really good offenses.
Can he get an interception?
I mean,
Get a few interceptions, maybe.
Yeah, I mean,
Be nice for him.
It just seems like teams are not going to throw at him, so I'm not really worried about the interception totals. If he keeps playing at this level where he's not giving up catches, he's probably going to be a first-team All-Pro.
Yeah, of course.
Which the Broncos have not had in years. Von Miller is probably the last first-team All-Pro that the Broncos had.
Was Chris a first-team All-Pro? Chris Harris Jr.? I think probably
at one point, yeah. 16.
Probably around that time is.
But I think Vaughn might have been one.
17?
17 as well.
When he was second for Defensive Player of the Year.
He was second in 2016.
So maybe that was when. We're getting a fact check here. Bad internet in here. Bad internet. That's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Good thing it's not a competition to see who's good at fact checking.
Yeah. Or just bringing up things willy-nilly. Like you.
Yeah.
I don't know. The first All-Pro season since who cares? Who knows?
Vaughn's last first-team All-Pro was 2016.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's been a player that's had a great.
Yeah.
But that would be a nice.
That would be nice.
Little deal there for him.
Because, of course, Justin Simmons was second team.
He's been a second team.
Garrett Bowles was a second teamer, right?
I believe that's correct.
I think that's right. So
that's.
Yeah, first team All-Pro. I mean, he's the best cornerback in the NFL. If he can continue to play at that level, he'll be All-Pro, I think. I think that's how it works. There's two, right?
I think there's three.
Three.
One's like a nickel.
Now, if he starts putting up some crazy stats where he gets like 3 or 4 interceptions down the stretch, he might be in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah.
Hard to get that.
You're not winning.
Yeah, I don't.
They're not winning, but they're in prime time. Everybody knows that he's
he didn't get the picks
guy
in prime time. Like they won't see that.
Yeah.
I think that
Micah Parsons plays for the Cowboys.
Exactly. If Pat Surtain played for the Cowboys, maybe he would be Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah. Or if he was
But then we wouldn't be talking about him.
We'd be talking about... Who would we be talking about, Eric?
I don't know.
Micah Parsons.
Oh, you think so? Maybe like Micah Parsons should be.
Okay, now who's your number 3? Who's your number 2 guy you're looking at?
Can I go to number 4 first?
You could do whatever you want.
Okay. Actually, I'll go way down the list, maybe like number 12, 13.
Okay, yeah, who? Quinn Bailey.
Exactly.
Yeah, what do you want to see from him?
Well, a guy I would like to see when he comes back, Randy Gregory. How does his pass rush look kind of in its new form with Baron Browning, Randy Gregory, Jonathan Cooper, and Jacob Martin kind of as that second wave Nick Bonito?
How many guys did you just name?
5. How does his pass rush look?
So that's 1 through 6 for you right there.
Yep.
Okay.
How does the pass rush look without Bradley Chubb? They've obviously made a lot of moves here to build it for the future without Bradley. Does it look successful? Does it look like there's potential there? And can Randy stay healthy and stay on the field and show that he's a guy you can depend on moving forward.
Yeah. I mean, you made the big move with Bradley Chubb because you thought that position is shored up for the near term here. And so let's see it. I thought Benito did a nice job against the Titans.
Yeah.
Like there was never a time where I was like, oh, he's standing out because of poor play or anything like that. So
Did they sack Tannehill twice? Is that right?
Jake Martin, he could have had 2 himself, but he was offsides.
It says 1.
Yeah, they got 1.
They got 1?
I think it was just 1. But still, a nice job sending the edge. You know, they did a nice job. They did a nice job up front.
I think from a setting, it seemed like maybe they didn't send as much pressure.
Yeah.
But you'd like to get Tannehill down more than once, I think.
Yeah.
Considering Russell Wilson was sacked 6 times.
That is true. They were coming
That's
after
6 times as many sacks.
Yeah. Fact check?
True.
True.
Hold on, give me a second.
True?
Yeah, hold on.
True. Okay. Anybody else? I mean, I think Sertan is the obvious on the defensive side.
On the
You
defensive
brought that up.
Yeah.
Dulcich, to me, on the offensive side. Is
You really want to see how does Jacob Bobenmeyer, if he comes back.
He's back from, or he's eligible to return.
Yeah, you want to see how does he look.
Yeah.
He's kind of your second guy or what?
Fast velocity, good accuracy on those snaps.
Yep.
Yeah, I am interested in that. Yeah, I'll be watching. I'll be out there with a stopwatch. I don't know what you're doing, but
No stopwatch for me. I leave that to the professionals.
yeah. The hard thing about some of these injuries is that you aren't going to be able to get a look at some of these guys. Like, it would be interesting to see, like, hey, a guy like Garrett Bowles, you know, like, where is he at? Is he still that premier left tackle, or is that an area the Broncos will look at early in the draft? Or, like, you know, with so many guys hurt, like Kanan Stearns injured here, would have been nice to get a look at him and like be like, hey, is he the guy that we see long term with Justin Simmons? Stuff like that. The injuries not just impacting this year, but also decisions moving forward. So
It's true.
that's tough. So, Eric, are you ready to move on to topic number 2, which is clearly not as important as topic number 1?
Why didn't we do that one first?
Topic number 2?
Yeah.
Well, when we were talking about this,
We were doing the
before-
offensive one before. You just
No.
You didn't say it, but
No. I just thought this would be a nice thing to go to number 1.
Okay.
It just felt right.
got it.
Yeah, not more
I
important.
knew
or
this
less
one was
important.
coming first because you said it instead of just thinking it.
Yeah, so you knew what to expect. We're talking about rivalries here,
Okay.
Eric. The Broncos, they've lost 5 consecutive games to the Las Vegas Raiders.
I check.
Yeah.
True.
In general, not been great against the AFC West.
No.
I'm just wondering, you know, traditionally you would say the Raiders, this is a big rivalry game. We've heard guys in the past, when Bradley Chubb was here, he said, I don't like those guys. This week, Justin Simmons says, I've been here a while now. I don't like those guys. I'm wondering, is there still a hatred here with the Broncos and Raiders?
Well, I mean, I think it's hard for the hatred to be as deep when, one, you haven't had success, which the Broncos have not had. Like, they might hate. I don't get the sense that people in this locker room hate the Raiders as much as they hate the Chiefs.
Yeah.
But I think that it's both of those are like, man, we hate those guys because we haven't been able to beat them, which I think is a different type of hate than if you were both really good and you're like battling for something that matters.
Yeah, like if the game was a playoff berth on the line and you lose, then you hate those guys.
Yeah, it's like they ruined your season.
Yeah.
That has not been the case in 6 years.
That with the Raiders in particular, that hasn't been the case since like the early 90s.
Yeah. So, I mean, and the Broncos really haven't played a division game that's that important since 2016. They played the Chiefs in Denver like week 10 or 11. That was the last time where it was like, whoever wins this is probably going to win the division. And the Broncos lost. And that is, you know, that's a different type of hate than like, man, I just hate these guys because we can't beat them. That's more like and I hate to say it, that's more like a big brother, little brother type thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Where it's like the Chiefs probably don't hate the Broncos,
They used to hate the Broncos.
but they probably don't hate the Broncos
Not
right
anymore.
now.
Patrick Mahomes has never lost to the Broncos, so
Right.
he probably doesn't even register probably.
Right.
So
It's like how like a Michigan State considers it Michigan its biggest rival.
Yeah.
But like Michigan's not even thinking about Michigan State. It's like Ohio State's our rival.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, the Broncos, you have to win football games and be good to put these rivalry games, including the one against the Raiders, back to kind of the prime billing that it deserves.
And really with the AFC West, it's been a weird situation here where the Broncos won it 5 years in a row, and then the Chiefs, it was like a passing of the torch. They just won the last 6. So it's sort of a weird deal where there's nobody else even in the mix, and at this point, the Chiefs have dominated for so long that it's not even really a rivalry.
Well, in the Broncos-Raiders games the last few years have decided who is in last place in the division.
Yeah.
And so it's, obviously not last year because the Raiders, they beat the Chargers to make the playoffs there. But it feels like most of these years where when the Raiders have come here, the Broncos go to Oakland or Las Vegas, it's like which of these teams can avoid being at the bottom. And that's what this is too. And so there's still, I think, you don't want to lose to the Raiders. And I do think you can kind of use the history of the rivalry to help get you up for this game. But I think if you're trying to sell that this, and not you, but if people are trying to sell that this is like just as important as it would be if the Broncos were 6-2 and the Raiders were 6-2, it's just not, that's not true.
The other thing that can sort of create a rivalry is if there's a villain, and like Patrick Mahomes, like isn't quite, there's just like, he's not that villain type of person, where you're like, I really hate this guy. You just dislike him because he's really good. And for a long time there, like the Chiefs felt that way about John Elway, and the Broncos felt that way about like Derek Thomas. And so there was like just a natural rivalry there where you just were like, I don't like this guy. There's not even really been that with the Chiefs or the Raiders. Like there hasn't been like a hit that like was like, whoa. And then like from that moment forward, you're like, I hate this guy.
Well, I mean, the Crabtree stuff with the Raiders was that for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's gone. Aqib Talib is gone. And I think part of it is just free agency now. Probably makes it a little bit harder to have that sort of villain long term, unless it's your quarterback. And like it was really easy to hate the New England Patriots if you're a Broncos fan because Tom Brady would get in guys' faces. He's screaming. He's,
Or like a Phillip
he's
Rivers for a while
trash.
there.
Yeah, of course. Those guys were easy to hate. You're right. Mahomes doesn't really do that. Derek Carr doesn't necessarily do that. He's really sad. You don't
He's just sad a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is
you
true.
You don't hate Derek Carr. You just kind of feel a little bad for him, right?
Yeah. We thought maybe Josh McDaniels would be that kind of guy where you're like, okay, spark this thing up again, but that's not even really.
Well, because they haven't had a lot of success.
Yeah.
If the Raiders were rolling, I think people would be like, gosh, we got to get Josh McDaniels.
Yeah.
Not the players, because these players don't know Josh McDaniels.
Yeah.
The coaches don't know Josh McDaniels. That'd be a fan thing, gosh, I really want to beat these guys to beat Josh. And I think there's probably still that opinion from a lot of them, but it's mellowed out because of where these seasons are. And gosh, the AFC West was supposed to be this incredible division. The Raiders are 2-7. The Broncos are 3-6. The Chargers have 4 losses.
The NFC East was supposed to be like the terrible division, and they turned out to be the AFC West.
Yeah. I mean, the AFC East is really good too.
Yeah.
They have 3 teams that are 6-3 or 7-3.
I think they all have winning records.
They do.
Yeah. Has it
How did we get here?
That's never happened where an entire division's made.
I don't know.
The playoffs.
This is another thing. You're just
there's just been 7.
Willy-nilly.
No. Well, I don't think it's ever happened because
where they all made the playoffs?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so
I thought you were saying
it's just gone to 7 just
they've
recently.
all had a winning record.
No, I meant playoffs. If you listen to what I said.
I don't think
that helps.
Said that.
Usually that helps.
You said they've all won.
No. I was like, has there ever been a time and you're like, and I was like, oh. Okay, well, I was still talking.
You didn't take your angry pill this morning?
No, but you did.
I know you were.
It made you angry. It made you angry.
Like, I'm rubber, you're glue.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's that sweater made out of? Like, it just bounces right off me.
I wish it was like Kevlar to go up against you. Because you're just firing bullets.
Yeah.
Or I could be like the Broncos, and I'm like the Matrix.
You're just dodging them.
Yeah.
That's smart. People, yeah, you're moving so fast, people can't even see that you're moving.
Exactly. It looks like I'm just sitting here. Yeah. But
Angry.
not true. I'm not angry. You're angry. You're projecting. You're like, I'm angry, but I'm going to make it seem like he's the one who's angry. I'm not angry. I'm happy.
Yeah.
I am happy. I'm with my two best friends.
A lot. Yeah. When you say I'm not angry like 8 times in a row, that's normally a good sign.
I'm not angry.
It is interesting that the Broncos have been most competitive against the Chargers, and yet, like, I don't think anyone really considers them to be a rival even. I mean, it's a team that you play a lot, but...
Yeah, I just, like from a player's perspective, going up against the same team twice every year, there's maybe a natural, like a defensive lineman doesn't like the offensive lineman just because they're battling like that. But it's not really, like, it doesn't make headlines or it's not like a big deal. So, and like you mentioned, the teams, they're shuffling guys a lot. So it's rare that you have two guys who've gone at it directly head to head for like 4 or 5 years.
Right. Even that at Talib Crabtree just was a couple of years. I mean, the guy that Tim Patrick punched in the face, he's probably gone.
But, yeah.
That was 2020, I believe.
Yeah.
It was in the blowout.
But the Talib Crabtree, I think that dated previously to just the Broncos and Raiders, too. So, I think.
Well, there were 2 chains that were snatched.
That was both
chains?
Broncos and Raiders.
Yeah.
But I think that before Talib got here and before Crabtree.
You think it was like...
Yeah, there was something, I think, right? Or no?
Well, I don't know.
I kind of forget. I forget. Crabtree and Richard Sherman used to get...
Of course. Yeah, they try me with that.
Yeah.
Try me. Yeah, the Aaron Andrews.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that wasn't Talib.
That was Richard Sherman. Yeah.
Maybe Talib was like...
Talib obviously got into it
behalf.
with Steve Smith before.
Of course.
But I wonder if there was ever a Talib Crabtree prior. Somebody could look it up, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, yeah. So, are you saying that it's not really a rivalry anymore?
I think it still has all the ingredients that if these teams were to get good all of a sudden, or were to get a little more competitive, then it could quickly come back to that. But I don't. There have been weeks like against the Raiders in the past, particularly like closer to Super Bowl 50 or games against the Chiefs, where you were like, we could tell how much this one means, or like the stakes for this. I don't have that same feeling this week. It's more just like, can the Broncos get a win against anybody?
Yeah, exactly. But I would say it's sort of like, it's cold outside, Eric, and it's snowing. Maybe you have a nice fire. You make a nice fire. It's roaring, but as the night goes on, it's sort of just starting to die down a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then now there's just some amber color,
Embers?
Embers, and it's an amber color. And maybe you just stoke it up and it could get back going again. That's sort of where it is, I guess, is what I would say. There's still some heat there, but it's not like how it's been.
That's kind of like a good metaphor for your personality in general.
That's
just
sort of where it
always
is.
glowing, ready to be.
But I would say, like the rivalry with the Patriots, that's been extinguished. That's gone.
Yeah, of course.
That's completely out.
Yeah.
It's safe to go to sleep. The fire's out.
Go night-night.
Okay.
Amber embers are gone.
Amber embers. Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
That was a prevalent point, Phil.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, I think
It's sort of there. It's sort of there, but it's not really there.
These rivalries will remain to some degree just because you continue to play these teams twice a year. With New England, one, Brady's gone, Manning's gone, but also you just don't play them very much.
Yeah.
And so it's not the same. And even when I think the Broncos played them twice in a row in like 2016 and 2017 after Manning retired, Brady was obviously still there, but it still wasn't the same like Trevor Siemian going up against Tom Brady.
Not as much as you tried to spin that narrative.
I didn't. Some people
weeks.
did, but I didn't.
Yeah, you were like, this is the whole thing. Would you say the new...
So who's the Broncos' biggest rival?
I was trying to ask you a question, but...
I got it out first.
That was good, too. I would say
You can do yours first.
I'd say it's the Chiefs.
Okay.
I would still say that is the biggest rival, but it just doesn't mean much.
Yeah.
It doesn't really mean anything.
I think if you like look at it as like, what would the team's reaction be like if they beat them? Like, they would be much more amped for beating
The Chiefs.
and the Raiders.
Yeah. That's a good way to look at it. It still means something for the Broncos because, like, in the first segment, which was the most important segment,
Yep.
I did say, hey, a win over the Chiefs, that would mean a successful year. So I do think for the Broncos, getting that monkey off their back, a win against them, you don't have to talk about the streak against them. You know, if you could stop that, that would be a big deal.
You're kind of blasting yourself because you're saying because we did it first, it was most important.
No. I was making a joke that it was most important.
Got it. So it's not most important.
It just felt right to start that way.
I see.
Yeah. But what I was going to say, or you agreed that it's the Chiefs, right?
Yeah, I think from the Broncos' perspective, but from like a mutual perspective, which I do think from a rivalry stance, there has to be some sort of like mutual hatred. I think it's probably the Raiders from that standpoint because the Raiders and Broncos are about at the same level. They've been at the same level. The Chiefs, I think right now are just not concerned with Denver.
Yeah.
They're
And
like,
the Chargers are just sort of happy and they blast everybody on social media and it just doesn't matter.
and they do a little video. And
Yeah,
your
there's some
stadium's
electricity
on fire.
somewhere and
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah, exactly.
Like, notice me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Hey, I'm here.
Swanson.
Ooh.
Swanson.
Hey, we'll pull that part out.
Clip that. At Chargers.
I was going to say, is the new Manning Brady, is that Mahomes Allen?
Oh, it might be Mahomes Brady. Yeah.
Sort of the same.
Wait, the new Manning Brady
Brady.
is at Mahomes Allen.
Yeah.
I mean, I think like Josh Allen has to win one, right?
They won this year.
In the playoffs.
Oh, yeah. It took Manning a long time to beat Brady. Yeah.
But until that happened,
But it was
people,
still a rivalry. There was juice.
it wasn't until Manning like won for the first time in the like that 2006 AFC Championship. It was like this Broncos Chiefs. It was just viewed like he can't beat them. It doesn't become a rivalry until you can each
In their
win.
season.
Yeah, you know. That,
Interesting.
So I don't think it's quite there yet. I
But
think
it's the closest thing, and it's the closest that we've got.
probably, yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. Those two teams, they seem like they're in a different stratosphere.
I mean, for
So
the last
when
couple
they-
years, it has been Brady Mahomes because Brady was in the AFC, knocked
beat
them out
Beat them. Yeah.
for the playoffs, and the Chiefs knocked them out, right? Then they faced off in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and Brady won that.
Brady won.
Yeah.
That
Yeah. But it seems like when Allen and Mahomes play, those are like the most exciting games of the year, really.
definitely.
So,
But like, if you're the Buffalo Bills, you're probably still feeling like we owe those guys in the playoffs. Like it's great to win
Yeah.
in week 3 or 4 or whatever it was, but we owe those guys when we can end their season.
yeah. Yeah, you still have that in
When
there.
you end somebody's season, that's like,
That's different.
oof, yeah.
That's different.
Stiff.
Okay.
Like when Duke beat UNC in the Final Four last year.
I don't think that happened.
I remember.
The opposite.
Quite
Oh,
different.
the opposite?
Yeah. And I don't think it just ended a season, it ended a career too. So
Evan Batty.
don't take shots at my Buffs. They're continuing to rack up recruiting classes.